We've made it, Chris. We've made it to a bar to record sit-downs and sessions. But I don't want to talk too much about the bar because we're going to do an entire episode or two
episodes
about this bar.
Yeah.
But we are in a brew pub, and give us a little...
Well,
these noises we're hearing might not be people, is what you're saying.
I'm not...
Well, not living people.
We are sitting in the historic Simon Silk Mill complex in Easton, Pennsylvania, which was a number of years ago refurbished and refitted as residential housing, like so many other old buildings and complexes in America, but also as part of the residential aspect of the development, there was also room for lots of good commercial development. And we are sitting in the premier aspect of their commercial development.
Oh, for sure.
And that is the Bosergeist Brewery in Easton, PA. There's also a craft distillery here. There's a winery here. There's a couple of restaurants. It's a very
Shangri-La.
Yes, it is. But we'll give you a lot more details on Bosergeist in Easton in an upcoming episode of Sit Downs and Sessions.
So one thing we were set out to do before the pandemic stopped us from being able to do this was to go to bars, to talk about the bars, to go to breweries, talk about the breweries, but also to sit down with a couple of microphones and have the same conversation you and I would normally have at a bar.
Absolutely.
So that's what we're going to do here today.
All right.
So the world is hopefully coming back, but I feel like a month ago, I felt like the sun was rising, the skies were clearing.
Yeah.
Now it almost feels a little bit like maybe that was premature as things start to get more complicated. And
I'm fearful, and I look at the pandemic of 1918, and I don't want to be a Debbie Downer here.
Yeah, but it's a good model.
But in the pandemic of 1918, there were waves.
Right.
And with the waves, there had to be some variance in the virility of that particular flu, and it started preying on different populations. The difficult thing about the 1918 flu is that it took out the youngest of,
right.
It hit.
Very weird flu.
Yeah.
That was a weird.
Where you would think there was the most resiliency in your population between younger males and children, that wasn't the case. That particular flu created a situation where people with stronger immune systems wound
soldiers.
up. Yeah.
And people who are of that age
Yeah.
is where it started. And, I think that's probably where it blew up into a global thing, right? Was due to the World War I.
Yeah, just because of the fact we were moving people all over the globe.
The world because of the war.
It did not actually begin in Spain. It was called It was called the Spanish flu because it was a Spanish journalist or journalists that started to write about it and make the world aware of it. What I'm concerned about is with this Delta variant is that we can make vaccines now. Like it seems like on a dime.
Yep.
I mean, the science is phenomenal, but the one thing that we have not and will never be able to develop a vaccine for is two things: stubbornness.
I was just going to say that word. That word was just coming out of my mouth.
And stupidity. And what we're seeing now with these people that have decided to politicize the whole thing or continue to politicize it is the fact that we are in the midst of a more virulent strain. And since we haven't been able to really vaccinate children yet, I'm really concerned about this fall. Will we begin to see young people be the victims as opposed to the 600,000 mainly much older human beings that we lost in the first wave or second wave of this terrible pandemic?
Chris, I read I forget where I read this, but I read somebody who said that this Delta variant is the most contagious respiratory virus he's ever seen in his career. Like, as far as how quickly and efficiently this one happens to go from person to person is much more contagious than anything he's ever seen, than even like your simple common colds and things like that. This is much more efficient in how quickly it spreads.
And I think we are all going to have to mask up again, because the other thing that I read recently is the fact that if you, and now you and I, well, you've suffered through COVID.
Yes.
Well, the other thing I want to point out too is I saw a study where they believe people who have been vaccinated, because of the nature of the virus itself, it reproduces and you can have a strong dosing of it literally in your nose
Yeah.
or in your mouth.
Yeah.
Now, you're not going to get sick because your immune system is already keeping it at bay.
Right.
But because you are asymptomatic and you're walking around and feeling just fine, you may become a bit of a spreader because any close contact you have with other human beings, because you've got potentially a high dosing of the virus in your nasal cavity, that you in fact may be helping to spread the disease, which is interesting because there is a company right now that is working on a vaccine that specifically is administered through the nose.
Which they've done for flu vaccines
Right.
and things like that. They
because-
do vaccines like that for my dog.
Yeah, because they also know that by administering it through the nasal cavity,
Yeah.
you're also putting a level of defense in that part of your body that is potentially the spreading point for other people.
But what if you're a mouth breather like me?
Well, no.
Listen.
You are like me. It's not that we're mouth breeders, that we just don't shut up.
But-
That's
yeah,
the
right.
reason why
Okay,
we're
I
on the
get that. I get that.
radio.
That's
That's the
probably
reason
true.
why we're
Right,
doing
that's probably true.
podcasts. So we're just spreading, some type of bad news to the world at all.
Exactly.
So.
Chris, almost every place in this country, and I'm sort of playing devil's advocate here, but I do believe this. In almost every state in this country, you can get a vaccine tomorrow for free.
Yes, that is the case.
There comes a point in time where I think we need to say things like mask mandates and stuff like that. It's on you people now. It's on the population now. We've given you, the government has given you every tool you need to end this pandemic. I'm not going to close baseball games or make people wear a mask to the mall because you don't need to, because you can go out and get a vaccine and then it's over with. I understand the FDA needs to fully approve it before we can really do that, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, there has to come a point where we have to say that stuff, right? I mean, kids in schools is a difficult situation because they can't be vaccinated under a certain age. But aren't we almost to this point now where government kind of has to step out of the caretaker role and say, we've taken care. We've given you the vaccine. We've administered these things. The rest is on you. If you feel unsafe, if you're unvaccinated and you feel unsafe in a mall, don't go to a mall.
If you look
right?
at,
I mean, there's got to be a time where we measure risk against available.
Sure. I agree with that to some degree. I am not a libertarian by any means. And
that does sound a little libertarian. I get it. But
my problem is, I do believe in the United States Constitution, which says that the main role of government is to protect our population from all threats, foreign and domestic.
Okay.
Disease is a threat right now, domestically and internationally. So, if I unleash the full power of the Constitution, the government, it's not only within their purview, it's also their job, because you're also protecting the economy. You're protecting security. You are protecting the lives of people that don't have necessarily the power or capability right now. Or, if this Delta variant becomes a killer strain for children, and it's being spread
Game
by
changer. Totally different.
If it's being spread by unvaccinated people, no. Constitutionally, my government says get that shot or get out of town. And for people screaming about, being told that they are, can't do this or big government's in my way. My problem with that is these are also people that claim to be patriots. Patriotism is not nationalism. Patriotism is about caring about your fellow countrymen, every man, woman, and child. And if you also claim to be a Christian or some variation thereof, it's also about caring for all of humanity. That means you take responsibility not only for yourself, but anything that impacts the well-being of your fellow countrymen or your fellow human being on the planet. If you want to bring in religion or
Right.
I don't see this as government intrusion at all. And everybody has guidelines. The same people that want to run around and say no one's going to tell me to wear a mask, they'll join some militia group in Michigan, and all of a sudden, the grand poobah of the militia group tells you, if you're going to come to the meetings on Friday nights, you better wear a black T-shirt with this armband, and you better make sure that your AK-47 is, polished and beautiful. And if you can't adhere to the rules of the Michigan militia that is anti-telling anyone what to do by big government, you can't be part of our club. All these people that bitch and moan about, someone telling you what to do. There is no instance where human beings don't set up operating parameters. If you want to be a member of the club or the institution or the state or whatever.
Don't get me wrong. I'm not.
No, I know that.
I think that I'm trying not to take it from a libertarian perspective, although it does sound that way, and there is part of me that is thinking of it along those lines for sure. But at the same time, the government has provided the vaccinations. I certainly do understand things like requirements of vaccinations for kids to go to college, for things. I get all that. I get that. Right. You need to be vaccinated if you want to get on a cruise ship. Yep. Absolutely 100% get all of that. But from the day-to-day business perspective of wearing a mask to go into a store, I mean, that's really your choice. To me, that now we're almost to the point where it's like, well, if you're going to tell people they have to do that, then why did we allow people to smoke for all these years? You know what I mean? Like, there's risk there's risk in the world, and it comes down to it. But we're at a point now, as you're saying, where the Delta variant, I don't think we know what this is going to mean and what it's going to mean for kids. And if it means something for kids, then we got problems.
Yeah, and then very quickly people are going to change their politics because their grandchild
Which they're
died.
doing right now, right? I mean, look at how quickly this Delta variant has turned. Name your state with your Republican governor who was trying to kiss up to the dear leader in New York. Or in Mar-a-Lago now.
No. He's in Bedminster, New Jersey.
He's in Bedminster, New Jersey.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
How they've suddenly changed their tunes, and now these guys are going out talking about, yes, everybody get vaccinated and all that. We're in such a weird place. Yeah. We're in this weird place where the governor is saying, wear a mask or go get vaccinated, and then their legislature is knocking down mask mandates at the same time. It's like the way we are in a place politically now that there's just not enough beer behind that bar for me to really understand.
Well, I'm going to go back, and again, I'm not saying that we should mandate masks at this point. I think in certain situations we may have to, depending on where the strain goes. Follow the science. But I will say this. If we go back to just the basic premise of the Constitution, which says to protect the citizenry from all threats, foreign and domestic, my thought process on that is it's like the Second World War. If one of our citizens decides to start doing something loosey-goosey where inadvertently information falls into the hands of the enemy, which means that we may lose, troops on the ground or on some naval vessel because, the old saying, loose lips sink ships. The bottom line is the government would come down on that individual or individuals with the full weight of government and taking
Yeah.
extreme measures to protect the overall population. So, in all honesty, if the science tells us that if you're unvaccinated and running around without a mask, that you're doing damage, is that any different? People may not like it, but I look at what people sacrificed during the Second World War, gave up personal freedoms, gave up resources, and we're told every day this is what you can and cannot do because of the effort to protect our troops and to win a world war. I mean,
You can't buy tires. You can't buy. I mean, there's unbelievable amounts of stuff.
the great emancipator Abraham Lincoln suspended the writ of habeas corpus.
I mean,
in the name of security and protecting America's interests. So for people that I'm watching people burning their masks. It's like this is your idea of. Oh,
this goes back to what you said in the beginning about patriotism and nationalism.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? A patriot is somebody who will do what it takes to defend their country and their constitution, their way of life. And a nationalist is somebody who just wants to be in a club, and nobody else is allowed in the club but me.
Yeah.
It's that. Yeah. It's two totally different things.
Because I want my club all black, or I want it all white,
exactly
or I want it all Jewish, or I want it all Mexican, or I want it all Catholic. I mean, that's what has destroyed mankind historically, is nationalistic zeal that, we don't allow. I've always said there are two forces that are always in conflict within the human species, and that is annihilation versus assimilation.
Right.
Religion hopes to assimilate under the ideals of brotherhood and love and kindness, and democracy looks to assimilate. Nationalism looks to annihilate anything that does not fit into its narrow point of view of what the world should be. And I don't care what country or political stripes you are. There are liberal nationalists. There are conservative nationalists.
Oh, sure.
I don't like nationalists anywhere, because we've always gone to war because of nationalism. We don't go to war because of patriotism. We respond to wars because of patriotism, but wars are caused by nationalism, not patriotism.
Right. And that's a weird space that we're in now, right? I mean, this is a weird thing. I mean, it's certainly not new, and I think a lot of it, is exasperated by Trump and the things that he's done and the things since then. But yeah, we're in this weird space now as a country where it seems like everybody knows what we're all supposed to think and how we're all supposed to do things, and everybody wants to be on opposite sides of that argument, no matter what it is. You're either a person who thinks that the masks are ridiculous and this is all a fake, or you're a person who thinks that you can't drive your car by yourself without your mask on, and the rest of the world sits somewhere in the middle. But the rest of us in the middle have to listen to this cacophony of shit coming out of both sides of all this kind of stuff, and it gets exhausting. And it leads me to we're now appointing a commission for January 6th.
Wait, could I just say one thing?
Yes.
And this was percolating in my mind.
Of course.
About the mask mandate, and when I was watching silly people in Florida burning masks in a little.
Did you really see something like that? I didn't see that.
Oh yeah. They're actually had a little aluminum, tray that you would normally put your baked ziti in, and they had it in the middle of the street, and they were all, walking by and throwing their masks in and burning their masks. It's like,
I was picturing a bonfire like they used to do with Beatles records in the South.
Yeah, pretty close to that. And I got to tell you, masks burn up pretty quick, so don't smoke and wear a mask. That I can tell you. just as a matter of a public service announcement. But I lost my brother-in-law. It's 3 years now, and he died in the Vietnam War. And when I say he died in the Vietnam War, he died because of the Vietnam War. His cancers that took his life were because of exposure to Agent Orange.
Really?
I have another dear friend, two dear friends, one who is maybe getting close to the end of his life, and another one who's been suffering from terrible neurological disorders because of Agent Orange. If my government or good science could have mandated some sort of mask or protection to protect those human beings that went to Southeast Asia and Vietnam,
Unbelievable.
I don't know anyone that would have protested the idea of being able, had we had the science to know what was going to happen. But if someone said, look, you see what we're going to use here on the foliage, you don't want to breathe that in, so you better wear your mask or you better wear whatever. I don't think there'd be too many soldiers that would have said, no one's going to tell me to wear a mask when I'm in the rice paddy in Southeast Asia. We've asked too many people to sacrifice too much, and they still suffer today. That's patriotism. The bullshit we see is
Bullshit.
bullshit.
Yeah.
That's it.
So I wanted to talk a little bit today about the January 6th thing. There are a few things, I think, over the last 15 years or so that have made me less confident in my government and the way America does things. I think Newtown was kind of the beginning of that. The idea of 26-year-olds being gunned down, and I'm not. Don't get me wrong here. I don't mean the government should have went around and rounded up everybody's guns and brought them in, but they didn't do anything. Nobody did anything. There was nothing as far as securing no federal money to help secure schools.
Because
there was
of one political party's ideology.
Absolutely the case, but as just a parent, nobody did anything. And the fact that we have a government that can't react even to something like that, and then you start going down the list, right? You start going down the list to COVID or something like that. We're 6 months away from, or more than 7 months away now, more than 7 months away from the worst armed insurrection in this country in 200 years.
Yeah, since the first shots at Fort Sumter.
And we can't even put together a 9/11 style committee to find out what happened and why and how do we fix it and what do we do and what's the cause. And I'm not even talking about political, okay? There's certain things that I think we used to be good at removing politics and just doing it. Yeah. Which is what we did after 9/11, right? We removed the politics for a while. A lot of people, there's people on each, that didn't last for long. I get it. But here, and with this particular incident, why wasn't there a response? How did this happen? Could it happen again? What were these people? Who are these people? Who needs to be? And here we are fighting a dopey political nonsense fest over appointing people. And you got one party looking to appoint clowns, for the sole purpose of doing nothing more than disrupting what this is supposed to do. McCarthy could have appointed 6 tried and true, dyed-in-the-wool Trumpers to be on this case. All Trumpers aren't Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Or Jim Jordan.
Or Jim Jordan. There are a lot that aren't that way. He could have done that and made this a serious thing and actually put 6 people on this, or however many it was 5 or 6 people on this to represent that side, but who would also be interested in finding out what we can do to secure the Capitol, what we can do to make sure these things don't happen again, and that kind of stuff. And no, we're not. Our government isn't capable of that. We're not capable of doing that.
Well, it isn't that the government is incapable, but McCarthy's goal in the first place was never to have these hearings because
But why not? That's the thing I don't understand.
Well, I can tell you why not. Because it will not bode well for the Republican Party. Because, 9/11 was clearly a situation, an external threat to our security. Okay, we owe it. You know, the old saying is politics stops at the water's edge. So when that U-boat sinks the Lusitania, or the Japanese Zeros strafe the Arizona at Pearl Harbor, or Middle Eastern terrorists fly an aircraft into the World Trade Center, we can all agree politics stops at the water's edge. Also, there were failings, you know, because there was, I forget the guy's name, James something, who was an FBI agent who was involved with the first bombing of the World Trade Center when they hit the substructure.
Right.
And he immediately said, we have got massive problems in communication between law enforcement and intelligence in this country. I think his name was James Kallstrom. He also was the guy who identified, I believe, the fact that the guys that were training for this one-way ticket were going to a flight school in Arizona. There were, you know, the warnings were there. There were internal warnings. We were tracking the behavior of Lee Harvey Oswald before he pulled the trigger to kill John Kennedy. But there was no cooperation. There was no communication. The politicians could agree to a commission, no matter how it was structured, to say, yeah, what do we need to fix? Because it was aimed at not only identifying the external threats, but also fixing the internal bureaucracy. The bureaucracy is not political as a rule.
Right.
It's subject to either working or not working, improvements or lack thereof. But what we clearly have in what happened on January 6th is that you can run as you may, but the Republican Party has blood collectively on its hands, and they know it. On top of that, they have a guy who's continuing. You know, they wanted it to go away. Their fearless leader is the one who is keeping the issue at the forefront by still running around the country and having rallies talking about the big lie and somebody stole my legitimate election. It isn't. It's like, I know Mitch wants it to go away. I know Kevin McCarthy wants it to go away because the survival of the party, nobody wants to look bad. No one wants to be blamed for the death of police officers. But the bottom line is the president's still running, former president, is still running around making the issue an issue, which means that it almost dictates that there has to be politically a response, even if it appears to be biased.
I guess this is kind of where my question is. In the 1990s, when Bill Clinton was brought before court, during the time, even, a large group of Democrats would look at that and say, you know what, it's probably not a big deal, but he did lie under oath, and this is not good.
And he screwed our party, and he screwed
the party, and this isn't great. No. This isn't a good look,
Yeah.
No one does that anymore. You can't, there isn't a large percentage of Republicans who, when they hear about how the White House reacted during an insurrection of the Capitol, don't want to know what went on there.
Yeah.
Like, don't we want to know whether or not the White House responded and whether or not our government is responding to threats and doing things, or are they the threat themselves? It seems like it's either, like I said, I still believe most of us are where you and I are, able to listen to reason and talk about these things, but yet all we hear from are these people screaming at us from the sides. But it just seems like there's no appetite to find out, and this blows me away. There's no appetite to find out what happened and why. And we all know what happened.
Yeah.
Donald Trump ginned all these people up, and we get all that. But there's questions about the response. There's questions about whether or not the White House responded the way. There was questions in the beginning about how they're taking orders from the vice president, who has no
authority,
constitutional authority in that position to tell anyone to do anything, but yet he is, because the president wasn't responding to a threat to our government. We don't want to know, even if the answer is no, that was all BS. Look, there's no way we get to that without finding out.
Yeah, but
why don't we get Tom Ridge or somebody,
I agree.
to do this
I agree.
independent of
I
the
agree.
politicians.
Because what will come about may mean the absolute destruction of the Republican Party as it now is. And they're not ready to give that up. And I don't think they have figured out yet how to morph it into a party that is more in line with Americans' middle ground thinking. Most Americans are moderates or independent. They swing according to the personalities they like. They have not figured out how to do that. And when you look at the math of America, and math is the most controlling force on the planet, if you look at our population shifts and growth, it doesn't bode well for the old boys white club in Washington.
No, it doesn't. Yeah.
Because the majority of groups coming into this country, the majority of young people don't see the world as the old boys club does. And
Right.
that club has not figured out a way to be inclusive, constructive, and there are some very, very good Republicans. I mean, but the party, the party has become, and this is what Washington warned us about in his farewell
Yes,
letter
it is.
to the country. He totally identified what would happen by allowing any political parties to become so entrenched regionally or throughout the mindset of American democracy that ultimately, he said, the parties will become more important than the people, and that's exactly what we see. And we are bearing the fruits of his wisdom, and it is a bitter harvest. It really is.
I mean, Trump spent how many weeks pounding on who's the owner of Fox News?
Rupert Murdoch.
Murdoch. Pounded on Murdoch because Murdoch called the election for Arizona too early. And Rupert Murdoch apparently said, tell him to go F himself or something. But yet, a year later or 9 months later, he's still banging. Rupert Murdoch and his people are still banging the Trump thing. It's like they're a slave to this. They refuse to think for themselves. It's like they want to serve this group. Now I understand that's for money. For money, I get it, and that's what this all is, right? And that's what we've talked about this before about how politicians now are not really even politicians anymore, which is supposed to be policymakers. Instead, they're like TikTok influencers or whatever they call that stuff. But when is somebody going to stand up and say, yeah, we need to know if the government 2 years from now is able to respond better to a mob of people trying to break in and kill the vice president? Yeah. We need to know. Yeah. Are we capable of protecting senators and the vice president? Nobody cares about it. Yeah. I'm blown away.
Well, there are only a few profiles in courage, and
there aren't any anymore.
Well, I you know what? Adam Kinzinger.
Oh, Stern! Did you hear? Read what he?
Liz Cheney.
But did you hear Kinzinger speaking to the police afterwards? I mean, he was almost to tears about what these poor guys had to go through. There are a few.
And and I think that has always been America, whether we like it or not. The majority of Americans have always been sheep-like, and the majority of politicians, they just look to have power over the flock.
Yep.
And that's a sad state of affairs, but it's also an aspect of democracy that we have to deal with. But I have faith, and we've been through much worse as a country. And I believe we'll come out better and stronger because.
Hey, Mike, I think you got somebody at your door.
Ah,
we're at the bar here. The bar is closed. The guy with a hand truck full of stuff. There he is.
Either that, or it's a guy with a warrant for our arrest.
Oh, yeah, I didn't really look too closely. I maybe shouldn't have required you let him in. Anything else we want to talk about here today?
No. I just
stay tuned, folks. You're going to hear a lot about beer in the next couple of episodes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Guess that's it.
More beer, less bullshit from us.
Cheers.